Good evening, members of council, members of the public who are joining us here in person and online. I will call to order the Committee of the Whole meeting here in the beautiful city of Summerside for November 5th, 2024 at 5:01 p.m. First item of business here is a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Councillor McDougall, seconded Councillor Duran. All in favor of the agenda as presented, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, changes, additions, subtractions, deletions? Hearing none, we'll proceed with the agenda that is before us. We begin each one of our meetings here at the City of Summerside by acknowledging that the land upon which we gather is unceded Mi'kmaq territory. Abagway is covered by the historic treaties of peace and friendship. We pay our respects to the indigenous Mi'kmaq people who have occupied this island for over 10,000 years, past, present, and future. Actually, 12,000 years. I'm trying to work on my memorization. 12,000 years past, present, and future. At this point, call on any member of council to declare a conflict of interest with respect to any item on the agenda here this evening. Seeing none, we're through items 1 through 4. We're moving on to item 5, which is committee reports and recommendations. We have 2 today. The first one, I will hand the floor over to Councillor Cameron, our chair of our Welcoming, Inclusive, Diverse, and Accessible Communities Committee. Councillor?
Thank you, Your Worship. And thank you to Sasha Nandel for joining us today. Sasha has been working with the committee basically from its inception to make sure that we are on the right track. Without Sasha, we would be at square one. So Sasha has been very crucial at getting the strategic plan up and running and guiding us and moderating every single committee meeting that we've had. And I am so grateful to have her helping us and here tonight to go over our strategic plan. Any questions that come up, feel free to ask and we'll go over them. But this is not a time to pick apart the draft, but more so ask questions. And if there's any detail that needs to be ironed out later, we can definitely discuss that as well. Other than that, if Sasha is ready, I'll hand it over to her.
Thank you very much, Councillor Nick. Just testing the audio. Everyone can hear me well. And with the presentation, I'm just going to share that as the open presentation on the system. So good afternoon, everyone. And it is indeed an honor and privilege to be here this afternoon. And I'm very grateful to be working with Nick on this DEI strategic plan. So once again, my name is Sasha Nanlal. I'm from the UPI PhD program. And in beginning my presentation, I just wanted to take a moment and acknowledge the unceded, we are on the unceded traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq Nation in the district of Epicot. And it is indeed an honor and privilege to be a part of a country that really acknowledges the indigenous community and the contributions they've made to make it what it is today. So just a little context as we move into the presentation. And the purpose of the strategic plan was really to get a comprehensive and actionable plan that we can move the city of Summerside into meeting the needs of all stakeholders. And so it was from the inception that Nick and I had connected and spoken about what was the vision? What was the vision for the future for the city of Summerside? And within that process, we asked ourselves, okay, what would be our overall objectives? What would be the purpose of this plan? And who would be the voices at the table? And so the process began with considering each stakeholder involved. And so we were able to gather various committee members and had to approach different organizations from the start. We were able to get in contact with most organizations we reached out to. Some of them, it was a little more difficult to bring them to the table. And so we are very grateful for all those who came to meet us halfway and have these conversations. Within that process as well, it was important for us to maintain a psychologically safe space. And with that in mind, we had to make sure that we were open to the opinions of others, even if it didn't reflect our beliefs, and understanding that voices, diverse voices, neurodiversity in itself was an important aspect of this process. Transparency and ethical practice was tantamount to its success. And we believe that within each level of the conversations and discussions, that we were able to have that back and forth and have those conversations with stakeholders, even up to this process where information is being shared. It's important to have that openness, especially with those marginalized groups. And so it was important also to consider the needs of those groups. They are what we consider to be in great need, and we as well were in great need of their voices coming to the table. So we want to encourage that transparency moving forward and making these items actionable. The procedure took place between May to November. That was about 6 sessions, not counting August. And so we defined the overall goal and had some sessions where it was more of education and understanding what it means to be looking at DEI, considering our privilege and power within the process, and the intersectionalities that existed. After all, if we didn't understand the topic, how were we going to find a solution? And so after having those sessions and really bringing our minds to the table, we asked ourselves, now that we had our objectives in place, what data did we have? What was available to us, and where do we go from here? And so surveys, focus groups, and discussions were used to gather this information since we weren't aware of pre-existing information. After the analysis, we did a SWOT analysis and a thematic analysis. The SWOT analysis allowed us to look at strengths, weaknesses, and also the opportunities for growth and possible threats to our growth. From those particular aspects, we were able to pull out 3 pillars, 3 strategies in which we would now dive into in more detail, and we'll look at in the next slide. To align and make sure that everything was being accurately done to the best of its ability, we had a couple sessions back and forth with the members of the committee in order to align and make sure we were reflecting their needs accurately. Some of the language weren't reflective of what they really wanted to say. That was changed. And so we looked at how we presented the information at that time. The write-up and presentation was completed and sent to Councillor Nick and Mayor Dan to have a look through as we went through that process of change and improvement. And so it was distributed to all stakeholders within the session to get that final feedback. Moving forward, we want to maintain that transparency and make sure that all stakeholders, all community members have that information in hand and would be able to incite that change internally, moving externally. So one of the main objectives within the strategic plan was this particular quote that came from the group. We want the city of Summerside to be a diverse and inclusive environment where all people have an equitable chance to succeed and thrive. Within that plan, the 3 pillars were created. The first, by no means the least, is accessible design. And accessible design was broken into 3 areas: physical accessibility, information accessibility, and usability levels, each of which are highly dependent on the other. We're most familiar with physical accessibility, thinking about the space that exists and how do we make it more usable for others. But within physical accessibility, you have to consider usability aspects as well. If we have a ramp outside, is it communicated that there is a ramp? If we have doors that aren't designed to accommodate persons in wheelchairs, meaning that it's not wide enough, are we truly being accessible because we had the ramp in the first place? So we have to consider top-down what models we have in place, including the pavement designs and those other areas. Information accessibility is how accessible do we make our information online. And in addition to that, considering the accessible features in the online platform. For instance, if we have a person who might be hard of hearing or deaf, they may not be able to hear certain aspects if they're listening in or looking to see different aspects on the online platform. For instance, a person who is blind, they depend on screen readers, But a screen reader could only go so far as there's not an image blocking or an image behind writing, because then it doesn't pick up the writing. So those are aspects that we'll have to consider in remodeling or remaking the online platforms that we currently use. Lastly, it's usability levels. So how easy is it for someone to get the information or get to a space that they need to be? So that's just one element within the 3 pillars. The second, building an inclusive culture, looks at 3 particular elements. Systems, which is the first, thinking about activities, and the last one, educational opportunities. So to build an inclusive culture and build that sense of belonging, we have to consider our overall design and then move into the activities. What activities make the city of Summerside inclusive? What have we been doing as part of our ritual of every year life here? Let's consider putting things within a calendar of design. And so when you associate the city of Summerside, what are some activities that come to mind? So that question of what is going to be part of our norm, of our life here, is put into question. And built within those norms are the educational activities. I know it's very dear to Nick that having that educational element actually did come up in the conversations through our surveys and through our discussions. And education is within the stem of that change process. And that's a major element that I could talk on for quite some time. So I'm just going to skip through that conversation. The last pillar is establishing safety. And we all know safety from the physical element, thinking about how the environment can be safe. But when we consider psychological safety, the individual at the center of that change, and social safety, the elements that connect people to one another, that's an element that may not be as forefront in the common designs. And so as we move ahead and consider these 3 elements, I want to ask that, we consider each stakeholder, making the process as transparent as possible, and bringing those diverse voices to the table. Because only through bringing those diverse voices that you become more aware of those small micro changes that you need to make a city more inclusive. And I just want to leave you all with the words that of Vera Mayers, where she says inclusion is not just inviting someone to the party, but asking them to dance. Thank you. So at this time, I want to leave the floor open for any questions.
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment, and it's important to note. Nick mentioned how important you were to the whole process, and he just didn't do that because you're sitting here, because I was at a meeting the other day with him, and he repeated the same thing. So he said how important you were to making this get to a reality, to get to the point where it's here presented to us today. So thank you for all the hard work you've done along with Nick and the other members that took part in this.
Thank you so very much, Corey.
Yes, I agree. I'm missing something here. I do agree, Sasha. You did a great job, and I echo Councillor Cameron's sentiments. And I was part of that committee, and I know that we'd still be sitting here spinning our wheels if you weren't on board. So I thank you very much.
Thank you. It was really an honor to be a part of the group.
Great, yeah, and obviously echo the comments and speak for everyone, I think, for your contribution and the entire committee's contribution and leadership of Councillor Cameron and Councillor McDougall as part of that committee. I do have one quick question, which would be maybe more directed to Councillor Cameron. I assume that at some point in the next little while, would you be able to take the draft strategic plan out to members of the public and other stakeholders for wider feedback? I know you've received some feedback internally, but I'm wondering if that's possible.
Yeah, we had that discussion and we concluded that it wouldn't hurt anything to put it out there and get more feedback on it. Yeah, I don't see why not.
Great. Well, and then think in terms of next steps, so you're going to continue to, I think you'll probably come back to council with is that sort of, where do you see the next steps from here?
Guess go to the public. That's going to be step one, I suppose. And then from there, when we get that feedback, we would then go into a more formal outlet of it and get it out of draft form. And then from there, we need to figure out, well, once approved by council, we need to figure out who is going to take on what tasks to implement those things. So I guess next step would be public, out of draft form, and then back to council for approval.
That sounds great. Really looking forward to it. And yeah, Norma, do you have a comment there?
I
Yeah, go ahead.
just have one question, which I'm not sure of. If the city through the committee goes to the public, would you have any idea, I don't want to put that on either one of you, but would you have any idea how that would work? Would we advertise it? Would we invite different groups and organizations? Would we go to the business? Like, how would we do that to be inclusive of everyone in the community?
Yeah.
Like,
I think we also have to realize that even with this strategic plan, we can never be inclusive to everyone. You're always going to miss certain people along the way. But we did talk about a potential survey through social media, perhaps through the city's website. We do have a list of stakeholders that we have worked with, and also some stakeholders that we had asked to be part of the committee and didn't have the time commitment to do that. So I know that they would probably also be equally as excited to get that information as well. And then from those stakeholders, they could also give it to members of their groups as well.
I thought it was really good points that you made, Sasha, with regards to hearing impaired people or maybe visibility, those kinds of things, visibility impairment. And I do know of some residents that are going through that, you know, trying to get some supports in place. So I think there would be a lot of people, or through URSA, there would be a lot of newcomers, people that would maybe find something like this really helpful. So I just wondered. Thanks.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Sasha. Thank you, Councillor Cameron, Councillor McDougall, and look forward to seeing the policy before council for review and hopefully adoption. But this is great. Awesome. This is fabulous policy work. So thank you very much. And that's it. For you, we have to stay here. We're probably, polls haven't closed yet in the United States, so we're not racing out. Item 5B under committee reports and recommendations are Heritage Board appointments review. So as per our Heritage bylaw and our public appointments policy, we posted notice for any interested parties and individuals to apply as a member of the Heritage Board. We had more applications than available spots, and myself and our city planner sat down and met with all the applicants, and then applied a scoring matrix and narrowed the group down to 4 public appointments. We need to have at least 3. The thinking was to have a 4th, just in case one person, over the course of their appointed term, were to leave or to move out from the city or no longer be eligible to sit as a member. The way the process works under our Heritage bylaw is that council has to pass a resolution in support of the Heritage Board members. So this is the first step in that. At this stage, basically what I'm doing is I'm going to share the recommended Heritage Board members to council, and then if council has any issues or concerns that they want to raise, I'd recommend that you reach out directly to myself, to Thane, or to CAO. You don't need to do that in a public session. And the citizen members that are being proposed for as candidates for the Heritage Board are John Jovanovich, Natalie Hashi, Marianne McNulty, and Lisa Carbone. and I can send that list as well to council if we haven't done that yet. And then ideally, we would have those appointments, we'd have a resolution with those names, subject to any further comments, considerations from members of council, at our next council meeting. John Jovanovich. John Jovanovich, I do remember, I don't remember everything about him, but I do remember he is an expert in, he's an engineer and has expertise and experience in heritage construction, and certainly fit the bill, at least from when we met with him. All right, with that, we'll move on to item 6, which is committee of the whole discussion items. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 this evening, so we'll just get started. 6A, recommendation, dog park, Northumberland Street, Deputy Mayor Snow. Deputy?
Thank you, Your Worship. So I have a recommendation here from city staff regarding the dog park or the proposed dog park on Northumberland Street. Between myself and Mayor Kutcher, residents in the area had reached out, 32 in total, requesting us look at the possibility of putting a dog park off Northumberland. So those that are aware, Northumberland is in Ward 4. There's a grassed area that is underutilized, been underutilized for years. I remember being a kid, we'd play a lot of sports there, ball, do whatever, but over the last number of years, it's definitely an area that's underutilized. This came forward, and the dog park and the discussion of a dog park and the current dog park location and how it currently serves our community is something that I know I have had lots of feedback over a number of years, and I'm pretty sure other councillors have also received feedback, just the location's not very user-friendly and maybe some issues with the dog park itself. So the current dog park is off Mackenzie, up by the water treatment plant, sort of out of the way. The idea with moving ahead with this dog park would be to have this sort of as the test site of future smaller dog parks. Dog parks are a great area, a great community building space that whether or not it's in Ward 7, 8, 6, 5, whatever, finding areas that people and their furry friends can go and meet other people and their furry friends and have a safe place to interact and have their dogs get healthy and active is great for not only the dogs but our community as a whole. It is a staff recommendation that we allocate the money out of into next year's budget. I'd like to put the request forward that we look at to see if there's any monies left over in this year's budget, and there's a number of reasons for that. One, I think we all know what happens at budget time in here and how it is difficult to find every penny dollar in the upcoming budget, as we argue for other things that will probably seem more important. And I don't want to dismiss how important this can be, and I think if there's money that is available that we could possibly move ahead with this in this year's budget, that allows us to sort of put the feeler out there, see what works, and then allows us to move ahead with similar projects in other wards. I vision it being no different than the parks we have throughout the city, that we have a number of city parks for kids and so on, but the same that we would have for dogs. So I'll read the recommendation, and then we can open it up for discussion or anybody if have any comments. So the Department of Community Service, subject dog park Northumberland Street, recommendation, staff recommendation. Staff recommend to allocate money in next year's 2025 budget for this item. Supporting explanation, local area residents, 32, have requested a dog park equipped with fencing and entry gate on a vacant property owned by the city. Residents have canvassed adjacent property owners and submitted their names and addresses in indication of support. And we'll see the cost and impact there. So one thing about this dog park is I think it's been really thought out, so it's not just putting up some fences and saying there you go, run around dogs. They're actually providing parking for people going. That way it's not affecting adjacent properties, water hookup, building, fences, so on, amenities as trash receptacles and benches and picnic table. So, and I think a key point to this is local residents have canvassed the area and they're in support of it. So it would be my thought that we do it and we do it right the first time, and then that allows us to roll it out to other areas, so. If there's any questions, comments, I'd like to proceed. Justin?
Yeah, no, great idea, certainly in support of that, and any others that may come after it. Just a question on your, I guess your requested timeline. Staff recommend to allocate in next year's 2025 budget. That would be referring to the budget that would be as of April 1st, right? Like the budget we're about to talk about?
So I've been in discussion with community services staff. It's something that can happen this year.
Okay.
They mentioned it because it's not something that they currently have a budget line for. We did discuss and whether or not if the monies were allotted to proceed this year, if they could proceed and get it done, and they thought that was definitely doable. It's just without having the money allocated right now, that had to be the recommendation.
Okay. So either way, and yep, I'm okay with that for sure. Either way, it would be something that sort of comes to life
So
relatively quickly.
basically, depending on our
soon.
discussion here, I would have to wink and nod at Kristen and see if there's any funds that we could pull from that might be able to.
Right. But if there
Move.
isn't,
If
it's
there
still
isn't, then,
something that's coming up
if
real
there
soon.
isn't, then there'd be something that we could look at in the near future. But I do see it's something that we could roll out quite quickly across many wards in the next couple of years for sure.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm not against, I don't have a dog, but I'm not against dog parks. But when the staff recommends it for next year's budget, I'm not sure why we would want to do it this year. We're getting late in the year. But I guess my question, and maybe you said it, but I'm not, the present dog park, is there an issue with that, or we just want to move it?
No, there's been several issues brought to, I believe, several councillors. I know
Okay.
I've had lots of questions about it, so
Yeah.
the current fencing, current area is not
Yeah.
very user-friendly. It's sort of off to the side, almost as a secondary thought. I think in good intention, staff at the time, if we remember, the old dog park used to be by the Suregain
Yeah.
building. That point, whatever happened, I wasn't around at that point, we moved it. And I think staff were just trying to find an area. And the area just, to be quite frank, doesn't work. Water was thought of after. Other things that was just sort of
Yeah.
added, where this is
Okay.
actual, some thought and was put into the concept of it. Local residents have gone out and done the work of making sure the neighboring properties are not against it, which I think is a big portion of moving this ahead in a timely manner, as area residents have agreed and thought it was a good idea. It gives us the opportunity to put it in place and then get feedback and move other projects along that are similar.
And like I said, I'm not against it, and would probably support it for next year. It's just that I've been trying to get work done to the parks, and we have an old wading pool there in Arrow Thompson Park that should have come out 5 years ago, and we still can't find the money to take it out. So I guess I wouldn't be able to support it in this year's budget, but I could probably support it in next year's budget. So I guess that's where I am with it.
Oh, sure, yeah. I think it's a wonderful way. It brings community and people together, so it definitely seems wonderful. Just a couple questions. One is, where is the exact location? I got Google Earth opened here. So is it right attached to the Confederation Trail, basically? Or?
No, it's on Northumberland. So the current one or the
No, where, yeah, the current.
the current?
No, sorry, I know where the
the
current one is,
proposed
but
one.
the proposed, yeah.
So on Northumberland Street, it's just
Nick's helping me here.
heading down towards water. So in between North Market and
But right there?
Notre Dame.
Right there? Oh, okay. Sorry, Nick's doing a great job.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think knowing exactly where the location is important, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, I did, and so that's perfect. I think the location really works. I love that it's kind of in the middle of residential, but people can go for a walk, take your dog for a walk. They might not even have to take a car, right? Some people can just be there perfectly. And the other question, there's a building, so not being really familiar with dog parks, I'm just curious what the 10 by 10 building would be for.
So I assume that's for their supplies and stuff in regards to the dog park, so I didn't put this
No, I
together. This
know.
came from community services and what they feel they would need to construct and
Okay.
maintain a dog park. I think this is quite the upgrade to the current dog park we have, and again, I would mention that there was residents throughout the city complaining about the current dog park and the location, and to Bruce's point, I understand what he's saying in regards to his park, and I'm probably the biggest supporter in here of parks and recreation, and I say that myself, but there's others, I'm sure, but our current dog park is not sufficient, and I think we should proceed with this.
Yeah, I will say, I also had complaints even before I got here in terms of the,
Yeah.
the seaweed, so, yep, no, thank you.
Thank you. I guess echo Ken's question about the 10 by 10 building, because the current park does also have a building on it, and I use it somewhat often. I have no idea what that building is for. There is nothing in it. I don't know if it's costing $3,800 to build that building. I would like to just know why we would need that, because if it's currently not being used for anything now, why would we think it's going to be used for anything at a new park? Pardon? I don't know that it can be moved at this point. It's not looking very good. When this came up last time, I said, like, I have 2 dogs. I love the idea of a dog park that's closer by. I do agree that the current one we have is a little bit off the beaten path. It doesn't have great lighting. So when it gets dark, no one would ever use it. If it gets dark at 4 o'clock now. So I wouldn't go to that dog park on Seaweed Road. Is that what it's called? Yeah. This one I would use if the lighting was there and things like that. Last time this came up, I did bring up the aspect that people with small dogs tend to not want to always go to a dog park. Speaking from personal experience, if there's any possible way to consider making 2 smaller parks so it's separated a little bit, so that smaller dogs can be on one side, bigger dogs on the other side, I think it would get utilized a lot more. Also with the possibility that you could take your small dog into the big dog park if that's what you wanted to do, if your dog interacts well with big dogs. But I think that's something that we should be considering as well.
And yeah, I have no issue with any of those. I don't know, again, I don't know what the building is for and whether or not there's a need for a building. I will leave that to community services staff and their reasoning behind it. Now, whether or not that just gets deducted from the overall scope of the work, or and also I have a medium-sized dog, and yeah, I have no issue with us looking at ways to separate and fence it off to make it as user-friendly as possible. Again, I just think the timing is right. We're heading into winter, we're heading into future discussions on funding, and it's a small cost to make sure that we're, serving the furry friends in our community.
Absolutely.
I understand, I support the idea. Personally, I can't support it in this budget year because I have a park, Lafergie Park, that has been waiting for phase 2 for 4 years. So I know residents would not be very happy if over expenditure was on this and not on getting phase 2 completed. So completely understand. I have big dog, small dog. We would not utilize the park for everybody's benefit, but completely support those who would go.
Any other questions, comments? And Kristen, if council was to proceed with a possible vote or discussion on this, would we be able to find some funds in the current budget to proceed?
I would like to speak to the department first to see if there's anything that they can defer
Okay.
that is budgeted for this year. because we have had some other areas that we're seeing may project to come in over budget.
So can we, can you have that discussion, then we come back to monthly council? And
Sure.
if there is, I would agree, I'm not looking to go out and spend monies that we do not have on, but I do think if there's monies that we can find within the current budget not being spent, I do think it's a project that's been sort of kicked around for a number of years and discussed from residents, so.
No, I can definitely speak to the department and we can discuss it further at the monthly meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate you bringing that forward, Deputy Mayor Corey. Certainly, I'm not against it at all. But again, I'm looking at a couple of things, and I don't want to be out of order, but I want to point them out. We do have a finance committee, and usually there are items that come to finance for us to kind of have a purview of them before they're brought to council, so that we can talk about things from a budget perspective, and I don't know if that was done. The other point that I wanted to bring up is just with fellow council members. I think it's a really good idea. Many of us have friends, family with animals, and it's very important. But the point that I feel is that when ideas and items come before us, when we're in, say, for example, in November, looking to find some possibly money in the budget that may or may not be left over from this year, and then we are going to have an onslaught of other items that are coming to us for the 2025-26 budget, and we don't know what we will face. I guess I struggle a little bit with how can we look at things and move them forward when we've heard about a swimming pool tonight in a couple of different wards and a park in another ward that are still waiting. And I guess I'm thinking of it in terms of like a parent. We have to be fair, we have to allocate, and I just think, have we looked at that side of it? Not against it, I think it's great, but I also think that we need to look at things from the budget perspective and being fair to everyone in all of the community and the wards.
100%, Councillor McColeman, and I think that's why we brought it here tonight, is to start that discussion, bring it forward with the idea of what is being recommended, and the reason why we brought it forward is because it does affect all the wards. It's specific to my ward as it came forward from a request from the residents in that area, and it has the support of the neighboring residents. Trying to locate anything at times within municipalities can be a struggle, as we all know, as we talk about rezoning, talk about anything. It can be a real struggle. This is an opportunity to move ahead and really get a feel of what it would work like moving forward with the support of residents nearby and residents throughout the city. Again, whether or not it's here or up on Mackenzie Drive, all the residents that want to use it get to use it. So it's not a ward-specific item.
I guess, if I may, just say it in this way, think of me like a big sister. I think it's, you know, there's a lot of people in favor, and I think that's wonderful, and I think that would be important in any ward. I guess what I'm trying to say, though, is if we look through the lens of fairness, if we look through the lens of, is that fair for somebody to maybe jump over somebody else in another ward that people really want to have their playground or their swimming pool that they've been waiting for 3 or 4 years, is that fair? And that's the lens that I'm trying to look for, or through.
Yeah, I understand that. I don't think there was any intent to jump over anybody else's request here at all. It was a request that was brought forward, some pricing, and staff had went out and done the pricing and brought it forward with a recommendation to do it in next year's budget. The request was to see if there was anything currently left over in this year's budget, which was asked of Kristen, and she said she was going to go back to community services. So whether or not there's money left over in this year's budget and we allocate it to this or to removal of a pool or whatever, I think that's what we decide at the time when Kristen comes back and talks to her staff. there was no intent to jump over or, yeah.
But if I give you that intent, that's not how I mean it. I'm just trying to say the question, how other people might be looking through that lens.
No, and
Thanks.
I understand that, so it just, again, it was to make sure that staff or council knew what staff was bringing forward, what I was hoping to see happen as somebody who has received a number of complaints about and I'll remind other councillors that have been here for 6 years that you've received a number of complaints about it, so it was a way to move a project forward nice and quickly that would, I know many residents would appreciate.
Thank you.
No, I was just going to mention that we put it on the finance committee and then we can bring it back to the.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. So that will go to, for any vote tonight, and that'll go to Finance Committee for review and then come back to Council. Certainly a good discussion. I did an estimate once on what I thought, how many dogs we had here in the city of Summerside, and I thought 3,000. And that's probably a low number. Every other house in our community basically has at least one dog. And to Councillor Trenholm's point as well, one of the things I'd love to be able to see is more than one dog park in the city, because one of the biggest benefits of walking the dog to the dog park is the dog also walks the person, which is great and useful. So anyway, look forward to seeing where that comes next. So thank you, Councillor. Next item up here for this evening, Councillor Trenholm, community park benches.
Sure, I guess we're staying with the community on the theme anyway. When a resident first told me about this issue, and I got to admit I was oblivious to it because it did not affect me, I think. And so basically, it was brought to my attention that the usual practice of the city is to remove the community benches in the winter. And this lady said, well, her husband, this was during COVID, and then her husband, I guess, was struggling to make a loop around their house and then going for a walk in the community. And so they'd stop midway on a bench that was there. And then come the winter time, the city removes the benches. And so it leaves, in this case, an elderly couple who are, I guess, growing old and some health issues. And in terms of being able to be actively involved in the community by walking and just maintaining the health and quality of life, it was pretty disturbing as this person just explained it to me. And then I started to pay attention to where these benches are. I paid attention when they popped back. And actually, there was two elderly ladies sitting there. One was in a walker, and one wasn't. And I explained to them, "Well, this is who I am." And at that point, I do intend to run for Ward 5. And I said, "Can I take a picture of you?" And I took a picture. And it's a pretty. The pictures tell a lot of words. And I think when you can see an elderly couple sitting on a park bench, they're able to talk, they're able to rest, they're able to have that communication, but even more so is across the street, a person yells, "Hey, it's a great day for a walk, isn't it?" And then they get engaged in this 5-minute conversation, and the sense of community building and belonging is priceless, truly priceless. It made me really proud to say, yeah, that's my city, right? And then I said, what can we do? What can be done to keep those community benches every month, right? I know other communities do. So what can we do? So I'm putting it out there in terms of for council. Any ideas or suggestions? I know I have reached out to the staff as well. But any ideas in terms of what could be done? I'm open to hear, and I would love to. For myself, I would love to see that, because I think and just as we just had the presentation on. I guess accessibility and inclusion, if you're looking at some of the infrastructure that should happen or could happen, that is one of them. If we want to create something that people can be engaged in and reach different people and all of the population as best you can, that would make sense. So I'll just leave the floor open if anybody has any ideas or comments, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Councillor. I was just wondering, I was just reading over your like the submissions that that you made. I wonder if it would be valuable to just sort of share what the staff input on this is, just because if anybody's listening and they just sort of heard your pitch, I guess it seems like a no-brainer, you know, put the benches out, and it's great, but I wonder if we could just share with residents that might be listening or watching sort of what the implications of doing so may be, because I see that they are included in your, not that I'm against it, I just would like
for
to, you know,
sure.
get all the information out there as much as we can, because I know that there is some service level sort of implications in doing so, and just be nice to help. It'd be nice to have people have that information as well.
Very much, yes. I definitely can, but I don't know if maybe the CAO, Gordon McFarland, might want to weigh in. I know there could be more information that he has, if you're comfortable.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, Councillor Trenholm did ask staff this question. We provided some kind of immediate feedback. Wasn't an in-depth study for sure, but certainly all the benefits of having benches in the community, as the councillors noted, are staff would certainly agree with all those. Yeah, current practice where we have benches along sidewalks, and I'm likely safe to say most of our benches we do take up and put away for the winter. To be honest, I'm not 100% sure of them all. I know there are certain areas, certainly along the boardwalk, there are benches through Memorial Square. I'm not sure what we do with them, but there are areas in the city where we have benches along sidewalks that we do take up and put away for the winter. A couple different departments involved. You have community services and public works who do the snow clearing. We're currently not staffed or budgeted to keep benches along the sidewalks clean, and I hate to use the word safe because safety is always relative. But if we were to leave benches out and have them there and inviting people to use them during the winter, we would have to make sure that that the snow was cleared. That would certainly be by hand. That salting around them was done as well. So it's simply not a service level that we currently are able to provide with the current budget. That's not to say that it's an impossible task, but currently we remove them. It certainly makes snow clearing of the sidewalks more efficient. And then they go back in the spring as soon as we're done of the snow season.
Yeah, I'm curious if we know what other municipalities tend to do, and they probably differ from municipality to municipality, but say Charlottetown, do they have, like, park benches and I'm gonna say park benches, but benches are used for a number of reasons, for people walking, like Ken says, as a place to break and sit and relax and when needed. So is it common practice that municipalities remove the park bench? Because it's sort of, that's half the year that the park benches are gone. I assume they're starting to be gone now and probably won't be back out till April, May. Is it like, yeah, I'm just sort of curious what other municipalities.
We didn't do that level of research for sure. And again, I certainly stand to be corrected. I don't believe we remove all the benches we have in the community. We certainly remove some of the benches that are along different sidewalk routes.
And is it mainly snow clearing is the thought? I would assume.
Snow clearing is, yeah, certainly a major reason for sure.
I wonder, just in having this chat, if there would be any value in maybe removing the ones that absolutely impede the snow removal, that are ones that are sort of smack dab in the middle of some of these sidewalks, and leave some of the others, even if it means us not being able to, like the winters now, for a lot of the time, there's no real snow coverage. Like, would it be okay? Would we be liable if we left some of those benches out that don't really interfere with the big sidewalk plows, and just sort of have them available for when there's no snow? Or are we sort of bound to, if they're there, we have to make sure that they're accessible and safe sort of thing. Like, would there be, even in your opinion, Councillor, if we had some of those benches remain out, even if they're covered in snow sometimes, but like I said, the winters now, there's more often than not, they're going to be clear anyway. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Sure, yeah, I think that's a great comment, Councillor. Even looking at if the staff or we'd be comfortable to pilot some different programs. I know there's particular individuals who have reached out to me and said, this is the bench we always use. These are the benches we always use. Because it would be nice to provide that year-round opportunity. And I totally agree. If you look up the snowfall that's on the ground nowadays, it's very minimal. Very minimal, but I mean, I know in terms of liability, it just takes that once, right? But there's not a lot of snow down anymore. But yeah, if there was an opportunity to even identifying which I guess have an inventory of which benches get removed, A, and then B, which ones really impede, and maybe C, even because it's adding concrete slabs, right? So it's the 2x2 concrete slabs that if it impedes, but if it's on a necessary route, I guess, if I'm looking at any benches that are around senior buildings, to me that would seem a logical opportunity there to keep them there, because certainly that population would have more mobility challenges. Places that are close to, let's say, community connections as well, right? Any individuals who have any mobility issues, right? So those types of facilities. But if there was perhaps an opportunity to do an inventory of the locations, that would be a starting point, I would think.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's fair to ask staff to look and see if there is some of those benches around facilities like that we could leave, and if we can't, at least have a look at them, and I think it's a fair request. I know they leave them on the boardwalk, and we seem to be able to plow around them, so should be good. Thanks.
Yeah, I think we can absolutely do that, and maybe work offline if there are specific benches that we know that someone has requested, then we can take a look at that for sure.
All right, I know I very much appreciate that, but so do a lot of residents too. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll move on now to item C. Councillor Trenholm again. Emergency shelter at Frank Mellish Street. Councillor.
Yeah, so my intent in bringing this up is not to revisit it or to uncover issues, I guess, but if I were to say that there's one consistent theme when I went door to door, and it wouldn't even be when I went door to door just in the area where the shelter is, it's anywhere in Ward 5, almost every second or third house. And this came from people who, they say everything is fine in the city, they love the city, it's a wonderful city, and they go, well, there's just one thing. So I think they said, can you bring this issue? I said, sure, I have no problem, because being your representative, right? And again, I don't want to revisit all things, but in essence, there was 3 issues that people talked to me consistently about. One is, I guess, in terms of how the shelter got to be where it is. And one was transparency, because people would like to know if that was the only location or the other locations that were looked at, and what made that the most suitable location. That's what they've asked about, right? And the other issue, if you're looking at the hours, and so 5 to 8, even people who I could use vehemently opposed to it, they would be much more open to it if it was 24 hours a day. Because the challenge is the temperature at 7:55 in the morning is not much different than at 8:05 in the morning. And I don't think we do justice to the community when we make those decisions. And I'm saying, I mean, all due respect. I mean, I just know that supporting the people who are unhoused is a top priority for the residents and myself and for council. But I think in some way it pitted two populations that are vulnerable against each other, it pitted the seniors who really feel vulnerable, and meeting with them, and there's from being legally blind to mobility issues, and there's just a number of issues and concerns, but also the unhoused, right? So we want to help. So I guess, and the other piece was just consultation. So that would be the third piece, is that there was a growing feeling that decisions, I know there was a meeting held, but that there was decisions were already in place, already finalized before that, right? And in my mind, under such a major project, consulting with, let's say, the residents, but also consulting with the manor. And I know it was a provincial, but I think being able to have the council and the province working together and doing those consultations, and it's not that people, if you know what the options are, and I guess it's giving people the voice, I guess, and trying to figure out what's the best case. So those were the three issues that were brought forward. So I figured I'd bring them forward here. And again, my intent is not to get into I guess to revisit everything, but if people want to comment, I guess please do, and I'll leave the floor to everybody else. Thanks.
Thank you, Your Worship. I find this a little frustrating because lack of consultation, I don't feel like that is an accurate representation of what happened. There are multiple public meetings that happen, and people are free to come to those meetings. All of our email addresses, all of our phone numbers are online. I can tell you for this, not one single person reached out to me for or against it. So if you want to then have issues after the fact, you had plenty of time beforehand to raise those issues to us. And there were issues that were raised at public meetings, and one of those issues was no one wanted 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. And one of the things that we said was, what about 5 p.m. to 8 a.m.? And the people who live in that area said, yes. That is much, much better than what was originally proposed. I mean, mayor and former councillor at the time went to those buildings and discussed with people, and I don't know what was solidified, because it wasn't solidified until a couple of months ago when it came back to us and we had other stipulations that we put on to the province wanting to build in that area. So I just find that very frustrating, and I get it that you're just bringing up issues that you've heard, but I don't often think that most of these are really all that accurate. People had time to come and consult with us. Whether they did or didn't, that was their choice. Our emails are public. They can reach out to us anytime. I can't speak for the transparency of where the shelter was going to go or other places it would go. But I know that we worked very hard to make sure that the people who came to the meetings and the people who voiced their concerns at the meetings were heard and people were happy with it. So it gets a little frustrating when then afterwards people say, I'm not happy with that. You do have to reach out and you do have to contact people and you do have to make your voice heard. We can't read minds, and after the fact of saying you're not happy with it, well, we can't really do anything then. You do have to speak up beforehand. So yeah, I find that just a little frustrating because I do feel like we did a really good job, and I feel like we listened to people, and I feel like we really took into consideration all those things, with the exception, I will say, with the exception of maybe where the site was going to go. I don't know what the other options were for that at the time. But the other things that are up here, I think that we did a really good job.
Councillor Adams?
I agree with Nick on a lot, and it's very hard. There's so many sides looking at this, and it's hard, especially when you have more than one vulnerable population that you're talking about. You're talking about your seniors and you're talking about your unhoused. I did vote no. It wasn't mainly due to the location. It was because of how I felt the staffing was being put out. So that was my big hiccup, and how it was being run and their experience and so on. But I do feel that the location, I know I've seen people online saying, well, what about Greenwood Drive? The thing people has to remember is this population we're speaking of, they rely on public transit. They rely on being able to walk to things. They rely on day programming at mental health and addictions. They rely on the province for quite a few things. That's not the city's responsibility. We have helped the province as much as we possibly can along the way. We put in many stipulations, like the opening 3 hours earlier, the 5, and they actually start, I think, at 4 now, and you check in at 5, so it's even earlier than it was proposed. The thing too, that security-wise, it's where it's at now, it's completely surrounded, except for the highway side, by provincial areas that are provincial responsibility. So you don't have people in an apartment building with a private owner having to get his own security, and then you have the province with security for the hospital and the shelter. It all falls under one. So it made sense that it was easier for the province to try and navigate the security concerns and make it work going forward. Like I said, the daytime programming at community mental health in the area, that's a big one. Up there, they don't just do day programming. If somebody comes in and they need sneakers, they need clothes, well, the workers up at the hospital are finding that for them. And they know who is out and about in the run of a day. The pharmacies are close by, the grocery stores are close by, and the public transit. So that was a lot of the main reason why. And like it was mentioned, the mayor and the former councillor went, and since it's opened, or just before it opened last week, I believe we had police go door to door up there and ask the residents, like, how are you feeling? What's your concerns? They're very proactive. And I think that this council is big into being proactive as much as we possibly can. Some things are out of our hands, obviously, but I think this was one that we really tried to get out ahead of. And I think considering so many what ifs, I really feel that we did, even though I voted no, because I still believe that the staffing part was whatever, but the site, I really feel that, putting this population down on Greenwood, what would it do? They'd have to walk further uptown to get to all the services they require every day. So anyway, that's my spiel.
Yeah, I was not gonna say anything, and then I was gonna say something and not. I think at the end of the day, regardless, and the reality is, regardless the location chosen for the site would not have been well looked at by some in the community. There would have been issues of, I don't think that's the best location. So there was no ideal location that I think the community would come together and say that's the perfect location. There'd always be somebody around. I think to Councillor Adams' point, and when they first came, I voted against it too, because I had lots of questions and thoughts about their timing and things they were proposing just didn't make a lot of sense to me, and sure enough, it took a hell of a lot of time to get it open. So I don't think there was a great location for it. I do feel for the residents in the area, because I do think they're legitimately concerned, but I think we've tried as a council leading into the final vote to put in stipulations that would at least help the residents in the area feel safer, whether or not it's the extra police services, the extra police officer, trying to get a sidewalk in there, that sort of stuff, fencing off the property. I think as a council, we did a lot to make sure that we made it as safe and as acceptable as possible for residents in the area. So.
Thank you, councillors and I'll speak to it really briefly, just so we get clarity in terms of how the the process followed here. There are a growing number of unhoused persons in our community, living in tents, living in sheds, living in all kinds of places that you wouldn't want anyone living in. It really came to a head here probably a year and a half ago when we had that incredibly cold snap in Summerside. But that evening we had to actually open up our fire hall, and we had firefighters spending the night in order to make sure that there was somewhere for people to go who needed to go to a certain place. Around the same time, we had asked the province, remembering that the provision of emergency shelter is the province's responsibility, so we'd asked the province to include or create a shelter here in the city of Summerside. We do have existing shelters here in Summerside. There are a few. There are none that are in the emergency that are emergency shelters open for one set period of time to another, but they exist, and they exist within our community. The province ultimately applied for a restricted use application. Pursuant to the restricted use application, council followed all of the process and procedures and that are set out in our bylaws, and our any directives with respect to how we have to engage with the community. In addition to that, as was mentioned here, myself and the councillor at the time for the ward went out to speak to residents directly, listened to their concerns, and then actually went back and posted flyers in their lobby to let them know when this meeting was here in council. That was above and beyond the requirements. When that restricted use application came from the province, the application came for that site. So if you want to ask the province about other options, that is their shelter, not ours, you can ask the province why they ultimately decided to pursue that the restricted use application for that site. And then council, as was mentioned here as well, included a number of conditions on that, both included conditions with respect to the site security, so the fencing, additional resources for police services, so the funding for an additional police officer, and police are up in that area, having their presence felt, particularly during the open and closing times. The other items were the 8 to 5 was the change. I'm going to draw a blank on what the last one was. And then also to Councillor Adams' point, there were we had a discussion about the operational staff, and as of today, I did hear last week that Jody Sentner, who was running the Lifehouse project here in Summerside, is running the emergency shelter, and I think that's good news for our community. We've seen what Jody has done for so many women and children who are unhoused and fleeing situations of domestic violence. And last night there were 10 people who slept in the shelter who didn't have to sleep in a tent or in a shed or in someone's backyard. And while we are always balancing the needs of many in our community, it is hard to balance the needs of anyone against that. So with this, again, this isn't something that we do revisit. Council made a decision. Council has approved the restricted use application. There is a 12-month review. So really, ultimately, in 12 months, council will look at what those requirements were and can come back and see how it went. As a final point, I did speak to the Deputy Chief of Police the other day, who visited along with our chief. And I'm not sure, Ron, were you someone from fire there? I'm not sure. Ken there, our Deputy Chief for Fire Services, as well as Jody Sentner, who's running the shelter, and they went door to door to all of the seniors' residences in the area. The feedback to me, at least, was that overall the response was positive, that they were happy that police were there and that it was going to be well run, and on we go. So I guess at 12 months we'll have an opportunity to revisit it. Make sense? Awesome. Move on now to number D, Frank Mellish Street Active Transportation Pathway. Councillor Trenholm.
All right. So I guess we're in the same area of the city right now. So it's Frank Mellish. It's so in meeting with the residents there. Frank Mellish is a provincial road, I guess, or a street. It's not a city street, but there's no sidewalk. Basically, we have a community of people, majority seniors, who are trying to, let's say, go buy groceries, visit their friends from one location to another location. That's actually whenever I was campaigning and whenever I was first dropping off some information, there was 2 elderly people and they were walking from the McEwen Road complex to the Roy Boats complex. And they themselves said, well, we desperately need a sidewalk or something here because they're walking on the grass, because there is only gravel, but the gravel's really tight and there's no shoulder on the road. And so I guess you can picture that being wintertime. And if you're looking at, there's a lot of vulnerable population there. So if you're looking at seniors as a population, there's a hospital there, now there's a shelter there, right? And the fact that there is no sidewalk. And with the manor right now, there's a cycling without age program, which basically takes a trishaw, which is the width of 2 bicycles or more. Well, 2 people can sit in front. And so it requires more width to be protected. And so what now, in terms of the provincial government, we're having a budget consultation right now. And as a Ward 5 representative, I submitted a consultation budget submission to them, not on behalf of the city, but on behalf of the residents, and visiting with the residents, that they would put in an active transportation pathway, roughly 410 meters long, that would connect the sidewalks. And why active transportation? So a 10-foot wide, essentially that if you're looking at wheelchairs, if you're looking at trishaws, if you're looking at people with mobility, it keeps them off the street. I watched a boy push his mother, I would think it was his mother, in a wheelchair on the gravel and grass. And I think you only need to see that once to realize something needs to change. And that highlighted, and of course the residents are telling me, well, if there's people with walkers and wheelchairs and they're doing it all the time, I didn't see that, but I certainly trust that is happening. But when you see something, you say, what can we do? So I don't know if there's any more discussion we need on that. It is provincial land, and so hopefully as part of the consultations that they're having, they'll consider it, and we will hope hear back from them, and we'll, hopefully we'll, unless people want to make any comment, but.
Yeah, I think that's helpful, so thank you again for giving us an update on that. There's information and update. Any comments, questions from council?
Just, that is provincial land there, right? I think. Yeah, and I think when we were talking about that, we had asked for a sidewalk to go in at that time, so I believe I mentioned it. So.
So Frank Mellish runs, how long Frank Mellish runs? So, whole length?
The section that Councillor Trenholm was talking about goes from Roy Boats, which goes up to, but it's that portion where the hospital is over to McEwen Road,
Okay.
not the other section.
Not
That's
the
right.
section to the shelter.
Shelter,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So, ideally it would be that, I know we put a part of the stipulations, we had asked for a sidewalk to go into the shelter as well, so that area, I do fully agree. I was out visiting my brother who's currently in hospital in Vancouver, and I was out visiting him, and a lot of the residents there are in wheelchairs, but the number of residents that got out of the hospital and out around the community and wheeling around or being pushed around by family members and stuff, it's great to see when they're able to get out and get active. So hopefully the province comes back with some funding for that and maybe right into the shelter as well. So perfect.
Yeah, I don't disagree that something like this is definitely needed in that area, but I would just urge residents in that area to use the sidewalks that are currently there that do connect to other things. So if you, it might be the long way around to get to where you might want to go, but if the concern is safety, then there are sidewalks in the area that can lead you to where you would like to go. And until the province is willing to either put a sidewalk or maybe a lovely 10-foot wide active transport lane, they should probably use the infrastructure that is currently there just for their own safety.
Thank you, council. After that update, we'll move on to Railings, a credit union place. Councillor Trenholm?
Okay, this is my last one, okay. But again, this is something that's been talked about. I guess coming fresh off going door to door, there's lots of issues that were brought to me. This one I know has been brought to council before, so I know, and I think it was April of this year. And before that, I think it was 2018 or 19. And maybe before that, I don't know, but I know it was at least then. And I know there was a recommendation that we bring it back to staff in terms of staff being able to provide, I think maybe, I don't do some research, I guess, maybe on quotes or something to that effect to see what could be done. And so I just, I'll prelude just asking for any update from staff on that issue, just with, when you're told that people's parents have fallen down and credit union place on the cement, and they're pretty embarrassed to tell anybody because they're blaming themselves, right? Because they're growing old and their bodies don't work like they used to, so they blame themselves. Probably they never even brought it to the city's attention. So when I hear those stories, I think it's just railings. That's what we need. And in the back of my mind, I can't help but thinking that it's just there should have been railings put in at the first place. And because because it's our mistake, let's just fix it. Like, yeah, we all make mistakes. This one might cost a little more money, but we all make mistakes. And I've talked to people who no longer go to the arena, no longer go to the Caps games, and they loved, like, the life and breath. And I sat with my father, actually, and did that, and they don't go anymore. So think of every event that happens there, including Remembrance Day, that what we want to do is provide that accessibility, that just like this, it's almost like we planned this conversation, Councillor Cameron, that whenever you're having the strategic plan come out, but anyway, I think there's a lot of individuals, more than we know, that have fallen, that have had a concussion, that have had black eyes, that have had swollen noses, because that's what I've heard. So I guess I'll pass it over to see if there's any update or who would like to. I guess I got a couple lights on, so I'll let everybody talk.
Yeah, there is a little bit of an update. In fairness to the staff out there, I think when we last spoke about it, one of the ideas was maybe putting in at least 2, which would open up a couple of hundred, 200 or 300 more seats. Sorry, I'm having trouble with my throat, but anyway. And before I start into that, I just want to make it perfectly clear once again, and we've done this numerous times, that the facility as it sits today exceeds all expectations as far as seating available to handicapped people or people that struggle to get to their seats, because you can sit in every seat in the top row, and I believe they can get you to the bottom row against the glass, just about every seat too, with a little bit of help. And when there's any events there, there's quite a volunteer staff that are there that are available to walk people to their seats. But anyway, having said that, the staff did I got a drawing done for a couple of sections, and then sent it out to, it didn't go to tender or anything, but I believe it just for proposals, and got asked for prices. They only received one price, and probably in the nicest way I can say this, it was the price, I really don't want to do the work.
Here's a price.
But here's what I would do it for, because I don't want to do it. So to me, it was quite extreme, because in one of the conversations I believe I had with Director J.P. DeRozier, and Gordon can answer this stuff a lot better, but I believe he could spend maybe up to $10,000 without coming to council. There's a limit, and I don't know what it is.
I think I can approve up to 50, but when we went out for pricing, the expectation was that we thought it would likely come in about $12,000 to $15,000 to do 2 sections.
And we were going to go ahead and do it. That was the plan. But the price that they got was nowhere as close to $10,000 or $15,000. So I don't want to put a price on safety. That's not what I'm trying to do. But it was at that particular, and actually he thought, well, maybe they misunderstood what we were looking for, and they priced, half the stairways in the arena, or all of them, as opposed to 2. but no, it was 2. So that's where that went. It had probably not a lot done since then. I'm quite sure that, I'd like to think that I'm quite sure that, you know, we could knock that price down somehow. And so it's still, you know, I'm 100% all in and wanting to do some. I don't know if I want to do it all. But if we're going to sit here and talk about health and safety and people, it's also important to remember that there may also be an issue with, once we put those railings on those stairways, we're impeding egress to also leave the building. It no longer meets code. So we have to be quite careful in what we're doing and how we're doing it. So that's a little update as I know it. I'm sure if JP was here, he could speak to it a lot more. And it was also my understanding back in April or wherever we had those meetings that I think the majority of people here want it at council, have no issue with putting in the railings. And I think, in my personal belief from listening to the conversations at that time, that we've probably reached the point that yes, there should be railings in there. But at what price? And so I'm sure they'll continue to work on it and look at it. And I know that doesn't answer much of your stuff tonight. But there's no question, and like I say, I live with a person that struggles on stairs, and I happen to have a few friends now that are a little older than I am, and have had them comment about going to Caps games or events and concerts, especially when it's a little dark and stuff, and there's no question that some of them struggle with the stairs. So it's an ongoing issue. It hasn't been thrown away or anything like that. They continue to work on it, and hopefully, before too long, we'll have some kind of answer or resolve that'll make everybody happy. That's the way I understand it.
We did talk about this before, and I know several times, but I know when people have brought it to me, I've explained to them, and a lot didn't know, and I didn't know until JP and staff explained it to me, that you can get, like you mentioned, to the lower, if you want to sit by the glass, you can get there. You just need to ask a staff member to take you down the side ramp, and then you come through, and then you can go like as low. Then you're down at the bottom, and you can be as low as you want. But I'm wondering, should we do some kind of a public, like, you know, we do the nice little videos when they do the ice, and there's a big uptake on that about like, different things, how the cup runs and what the staff do. So I'm wondering if we could do something on that, how the staff, you know, if you approach the staff, how they could escort the person to that, like just a little comms bit, and then until prices get reasonable or whatever.
And they have, I think they have staff right there that could do
Yeah.
that probably. They're
Yeah.
pretty good at that stuff. So
Yeah.
that's a good idea, and
Yeah.
it could probably quite easily be done for, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So can we request that we maybe work on something like that for, especially we're in hockey season, we have lots of grandparents and, you know, people that like to, I don't have to say grandparents because, you know, it could be me that can't climb the stairs tomorrow, so, just people that like to be at the cup and watch their family members and stuff, so maybe we can do it sooner than later.
Yeah, just sort of an afterthought. I just recall when we brought this up a couple of times ago, JP or Gordon could probably speak better as to how this relates to accessibility, but I know it was mentioned that in a lot of other arenas, Charlottetown being one of them, when you enter the arena itself, you enter on the bottom and you have to travel up in order to get to accessible areas, whereas at our facility, the entrances are all at the top of the bowl, which makes it, this is where I sort of would rely on Gordon or JP to sort of tell us how it relates to being accessible. But if you enter on the top, it's better because you don't have to travel to those accessible areas. You enter on the accessible level. That's sort of the capacity at which I can recall that conversation going, but I know it was sort of a unique feature to our facility at the time, whereas a lot of the other ones,
Yeah.
you enter on the ground level.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct, and just maybe building on Councillor Morrison's comments, you know, this discussion has taken place at council many times over the last number of years. The building was certainly designed with accessibility in the forefront and has won, I believe, the city has won awards for the design of the building. But the accessibility was certainly top of mind. Whether or not it was a mistake not to have railings is certainly a subjective discussion. There are arenas all throughout North America that have railings, and there's arenas that don't. And it doesn't seem to be some rhyme or reason to that. Yeah, and we do, as Councillor Morrison pointed out, the number of fully accessible seats along the top of the bowl, the number's somewhere around 500, I believe. So the other consideration that we've the ability for patrons to egress if there was an emergency is certainly an issue in the building code with regards to adding railings after the fact that weren't part of the original design. Yeah.
Thank you, Your Worship. I certainly appreciate everybody's comments. I think they're all very valid points that people are making. I remember the gentleman that sent the information in. I remember talking to him at the College of Piping, and the person he was with had difficulty in mobility. And I think, yes, there is a cost. There is, with the egress, we have to be very aware of those kinds of things. But I think the one point that we need to arch over everything that we're saying is, and I will say it as a senior, because a lot of times it's people that are losing that mobility, it's losing their independence. It's losing their dignity to be independent. And I think sometimes that has no price. That's too much. I realize that we have to look at it in budgets and be realistic. And I think people sometimes will not ask those questions because they don't want to be embarrassed. They don't want to be centered out. But I think it's incumbent upon us as a council that we represent all ages and all people from all walks of life, health and mobility. And I think if there is a cost, if there's anything to explore that we can make something happen, that it doesn't put the accessibility of the building at risk, but it invites people to remain active as long as they can, then I think that it is something that we really need to try and make that work if at all possible.
Thank you, Councillor. I think so. I think this is the fourth time we've spoken about railings at the Cup, and as I understand, the current council direction is for staff to explore options to install 2 railings, which would open up 4 sections for greater accessibility for members of our community. To Councillor Morrison's point, I think there was an initial discussion with potential contractors, and those bids the costing came back, you can correct me, but at the $70,000 area. What we may need to do is, one, showcase some of the opportunities and the seating availability for individuals with accessibility issues. But to the second is not give up on the fact that because we got one person submitted an overpriced bid or that seemed outside the scope of what we would expect that cost to be, to just give up and walk away on it. So perhaps through if council is looking to give direction to staff to do some social media to highlight some of the accessible seating opportunities. That may also be the opportunity to also include the fact that council is looking for the installation of 2 railings, and would certainly be open to having discussion from further contractors. It may be that we have to get to a situation in budget where we tender with a minimum pricing. But I'd certainly agree with all of Councillor McColeman's points there at the end, that it is and really, I don't think we've changed direction. I think we've come a long way. The other councillor, I'll come back to you, but I just wanted to touch on 2 things too as well. That the building at the time was built to code. That previous council had explored this issue and had a report done by engineering consultants that identified that installation of certain types of railings would actually make the facility less safe. So I don't think it is a mistake. Council certainly at the time needed to receive that and follow that advice. And council here has looked at, are there opportunities to make a couple of adjustments? So, Councillor Morrison, I'll pass it back to you.
Just wanted to touch on the fact too that, who knows in a building like that and depending on everything that happens on there, we could get real lucky and maybe talk to a fabricator that's in that type of business that maybe we could work out a deal where they could put in 2 or 3 or 4 railings and we could trade it for some kind of service in kind with them or a name somewhere or advertisement. Anyway, that's all I had to say.
And so, Councillor Trenholm, is that a good update for you?
It is, but I would definitely really encourage if we could set a timeline, I guess, in terms of sometime in the future, being able to do that, but we may not be there today, but if we could, as opposed to, this is not an issue we probably want to keep on revisiting, right? If we have a deadline, timelines, I mean, those are great things to have, so I'd be in favor of that.
Okay, well, maybe we can do the public relation piece and then also look at maybe using that to get some more attention, and council can put that on as a budget item for those 2 railings. Item 6F, customer service and conflict resolution. Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess it's sort of 2-part. It's for the staff and it's for the residents. I don't want people to think this is an attack on staff, because it's not. So there's been instances where, different councillors are contacted about maybe an interaction with a staff member, between a staff member and a resident and so on. So I got to thinking, and what sort of triggered it was, at the FPIM, they had the conflict resolution board. And I was like, and it was about how politicians are, sometimes the first line in, hearing and getting everything and the conflict and the threats and so on. But there's also the side of it that, well, what are we doing to train our staff in 2 areas, for the customer service part of it and the conflict resolution when something does happen. So I quickly just sent an email just to see, well, maybe it's already in place and maybe we already do it and there's no need. But Director Kendra so there wasn't anything in place with the city. She didn't know what each individual department within the city did. I know some are more customer service oriented than others, but I think that any staff member could run into a member of public, whether it be somebody that's, painting lines, or, whether it be somebody that's lifeguarding at the pool. It doesn't matter. You can run into an issue anywhere. And unfortunately, sometimes things do seem to escalate more now than they did. So I guess what I'm requesting is, well, we look at 2 things. We look at what customer service we are, professional development, we are giving our employees, and all employees. It's not just the people that are taking payments downstairs for their utilities. It's the person that's running the backhoe. It's the person that's lifeguarding at the pool. It's the person at Kutcher Summerside who's doing the tour. It's across the board, because you never know when those people are going to be in conflict with, a member of the public. So the customer service part, and then the conflict resolution part of it. I think it goes hand in hand. I don't think you can have one without the other, because I don't think customer service exists without there being a conflict every once in a while. So I really would like, as a city, for our staff and for our residents, for that to be reviewed, and just what the results are. If there has to be, I don't want to say there's a cause and an effect, and there has to be an outcome if somebody is repeatedly not acting appropriately. Like, so that would be the conflict resolution part. Like, maybe conflict resolution would help a staff member or understand why a resident is going on to them about this. Like, maybe it was years of not getting your ditch filled and now they're upset because of whatever. That's just an example. But I really think as a city, we need to look at customer service, professional development, and conflict resolution education for our staff. And I'm not one specific issue is coming to mind, because we've all had issues that have been brought to us by residents and by staff. So I really think that in our best interest, if we're out in the public and if we're saying we're receiving it, then I think it's only fair that we do the same for our residents and our staff that we're supposed to be leading the way for. So I don't know if we should have like a sit down, like maybe a sit down with Director Kendra, just so she can hear firsthand. Dr. Kendra is a Director of Human Resources and Legal. So if she could hear some of what we're hearing, and then maybe she could go to staff and she could do the same. Like, what are some things that you guys are hearing? And because there's tons of available things, like, you know, like, and it doesn't even have to be getting somebody in. There's lots online that, you know, people can be watching and doing little PDs. And I mean, I just think it'd be very beneficial for everybody. So I don't know how we go about that to get that started, get that ball rolling, but.
I think it's a great idea. I think historically, different departments have done different customer service training, and I think the de-escalation, the training and the conflict resolution is likely, just as you said, is pretty important these days as well. So yeah, I'll sit down with the director and start to plan out what some options might be. Might be some budget considerations for the upcoming budget, but
Yep.
Either way, it's important stuff, and good professional development for our staff. So.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
That's great, Councillor. Thank you for bringing that forward. So important to also to take note that so many of everyone who works at the city, as well as all of us, are forward-facing and represent the city, and we need to make sure that they have the appropriate training. That would be great. Next item, Councillor McColeman, residents' ongoing concerns.
I can tell you that Councillor Carey and I did not talk about how this was going to come forward, but my information, residents' ongoing grievances and concerns, the reason why I put that down on my request is simply so that we can look at it under other safe neighborhoods, enjoyment of property and homes, and especially under the nuisance bylaw. And I think sometimes what happens, and as I spoke with CAO Gordon earlier this afternoon on this in no way reflects that I'm trying to poke holes at our Summerside Police Services or any staff in departments or whatnot. But I do think that it is a resolving, ongoing, continuous concerns from residents. And if residents take the time to email or call any one of us as council members or the mayor with concerns, and as a councillor, we liaison with that individual for support in some way back through our city or the department. Sometimes residents, and I'm sure we do hear this, that sometimes residents do feel at times they are left hanging on a matter without clear resolution, which gets back to the point that Councillor Carey is speaking of, if we could have some type of resolution. I really feel that there is a need to have some type of a triage for service, so that even though the residents' concern has been heard through email, phone message, whatever, sometimes I think what happens to us as a council is that we're caught in a time warp of the details going to the department through the CAO, and then the residents may very well get back to us several times, and we're not really sure of where it's at in that track. And I think that would alleviate a lot of frustration. I think sometimes what happens is that people feel as taxpayers their concerns are not dealt with effectively. Late night noise, small groups, people on city properties with loose garbage or other items, used needles on the ground, loud talking, argument, disruptions to quiet enjoyment of neighborhoods by residents and families. These are some of the things, and I've heard this from residents, where they do feel fearful to speak up, vulnerable to walk through green space areas around the city for fear of being yelled at, find encampments possibly, and a lot of times these folks will say, we understand the concern with homelessness and the need for affordable housing. It's not that they're saying anything, they know that there is a need, but what their concern is, if it's like a toothache that continues on and there's no relief, or it's not, say for example, a breaking the law matter, but it continues to happen to them. And if you have somebody that's a shift worker, or somebody that's up at say 5:30 or 6 in the morning and they've been up all night because of noise or whatever, I can tell you, I'm sure we all have experienced it, where their tension is fairly high. And we're usually first front line that will get that phone call or email. So I have promised them that I would bring this information forth. I know that our staff do a great job, but I think we need to tweak that in some way, just the way as it was pointed out tonight, that, you know, maybe through our communications or through our social page, Facebook page, you know, there are some things that maybe people can do. Sometimes I think when it could possibly be a social justice situation, the police are not in a position where they can deal with it easily. And so I think that sometimes is what happens. In some cases, we can hear back from people who still are having problems with those situations and get very upset. So I wanted to put that out to people and my fellow councillors tonight. Just, I do think sometimes people feel that when they are told there's nothing that can be done, or the law isn't being broken, they feel that as taxpayers they're in a limbo situation. They are told not to take the law into their own hands, but sometimes the frustrations escalate and they don't want to be fighting and arguing, but sometimes they feel that they're left at their own demise to deal with the situation, and that can only escalate it more. So I've made that promise that I would bring it forth, and I do hope that, you know, there have been increased patrols in green spaces and through the parks. I think that, you know, I'd like for us as a community and a municipality try to let our residents know that they're not being neglected, because I don't think that is the case. I think it's sometimes there's just some way that we need to triage, that they know it's summer's in progress and the work is being done on trying to deal with it. So that was the reason why I brought it forth, Your Worship.
Comments, questions, statements from council? Yeah, thank you for bringing that forward, Councillor. Move on to the next, Housing Accelerator Fund Council debrief, Councillors Adams and McColeman.
I guess I had a lot of residents reach out after the half vote Housing Accelerator Fund vote, and there just seemed to be still a lot of unrest, to maybe put it politely, with how people were feeling. just in regards to some information they were waiting on. So I made a little list, because otherwise I'll get off track. And so I guess, and if you can't get me the information tonight, I guess I'd like for us to take it back to another meeting, if at all possible. I understand that staff's not here tonight. A big one that I've gotten a lot of messages about is minimum lot size. We've never really been told what is the smallest lot possible that a 4-unit could go on. And people have been told, oh, like maybe this, I'm not sure about that lot. Well, maybe this lot would work, maybe that lot wouldn't work. People need a number, they need a measurement. And some staff have indicated there might be a measurement, but then that sort of gets pulled back whenever we ask the question in public. And I know it was hard because we had staff working with the We6 group, so there was sort of like a lot of back and forth when decisions were being made. So residents need confirmation on what a minimum lot size is for a 4-unit to be built. The next thing would be deeds. I've had several deeds sent to me, and people have highlighted it where it says in their deed that it's single-family dwelling only. It doesn't say R1, it just says single-family dwelling only. So their issue is they don't see how they should have, and I agree, why should residents have to go and get a legal opinion when it's us as a city who has changed the rules after the fact? So as a city, can we get a legal opinion for residents on what their deeds are saying? So if a deed is saying that this property, if my deed is saying that it's to be a single-family dwelling property, and then something happens and my house burns down, can the person that comes in put a 4-unit on it when it says on my deed that that property is supposed to be single-family dwelling? I guess I think that the least we can do is get, with the money that's been spent so far, is get a proper legal opinion for people rather than dozens and dozens of people go out and have to pay for something that they didn't, that wasn't brought on them. The third thing would be staff participation. What can we do as a city to ensure that residents who are also staff members can participate freely and openly and give their opinions? Because during this, the Housing Accelerator Fund, and this is just an example, it could have been something else, during this Housing Accelerator Fund vote and the talks, it became very clear that many staff that live within the city did not feel comfortable, or when they did ask, they were not given the information. So we need to find a way to be able to respect that they're also residents. They pay, we might pay their salary, but they also give it back to us in taxes and everything else. And they choose to live and work here. And this, so we have to figure out how we are going to be able to let staff participate the same as every other resident without them being fearful of repercussions with their employment. The fourth thing is flyers. You might say flyers don't work, but are we going to use though the form of sending out flyers, and I'm being proactive here because there's going to be something come up and we have to get the word out. So before it comes up, can we decide that we're going to use these flyers as a way of getting the word out? Because whether you like it or not, it might be old school to some, but it works. If anything, what we just went through with the half consultations and so on, it proved that sending a flyer door to door works. And so we had said, how are we going to reach more people? Well, when there's something that we really want community feedback on, I don't see how we can't put the work out there for somebody to deliver a flyer. We put the work out there for people to deliver a utility bill. We can staple a flyer to that utility bill and away you go. So I'd really like us to make a commitment now to be better at that, because it was sort of embarrassing for me that the residents had to do that in order to feel that even if we did little open houses and stuff beforehand, the word wasn't getting out. It wasn't working, obviously, because once those flyers hit the door, then the people started. So we really have to be, if that's what it takes for now, to get people engaged, to get them used to coming to meetings, to get them used to coming to town halls, to get them used to messaging us. If flyers have to go out for a few times until people feel comfortable coming to us, maybe feel comfortable coming to a town hall, then I don't see why we can't do that. First, second, third, fourth, fifth. The fifth thing would be, when will we know the full amount that as a city we paid We6? And the second, it's a two-part question, and that was an RFP for that, right? I believe, for the We6 work. I believe we went to RFP for that. Gordon, do you remember? I said yes off the top of my head, but I said I would double check. I guess I could have Googled it.
I may have to triple check, but I believe we continued working with We6 after the mayor's and council's task force on affordable housing. I think we rolled right into.
Got you. Okay.
Yeah.
So it was just we segued into the next thing because they were already familiar with. Okay. So that's something. So how that will be made public, or that's a public amount that we can, and when is that work done for We6? I guess is another part of it. Like how long does that go on for?
It'll be ongoing for a while, I imagine, but the way the official plan.
Yeah.
But that work, right now, as I understand, continues on the implementation piece. We just simply don't have the staff capacity to be able to do all of the work, right? So,
Right.
So that's why you use additional support when you have a high amount of work that needs to be done that we don't have the capacity for.
So I guess those are the things that, if we can find out those, that, like, people are still reaching out about these things. So they're still wondering, they still need confirmation on lot sizes, on deeds, on, residents are still wondering how they can participate and be a staff member at the same time. They want communication, but you know what, they might not be online, they might not. So that, the flyer thing, the commitment to just doing that flyer, like if you want, I'll come in and staple it to something. It does, if we can just, I'm not getting on rollerblades and going door to door like these kids did when they got the word out, but if there's something we can do to just get the word out in different ways until people feel comfortable engaging and know that we're wanting to engage with them. So those are my things, if those can be brought forward for answers at some point.
Councillor Gordon, I'm looking at you. Yeah, I don't see any reason why staff can't provide answers on some of that stuff. I do know, like, when we talk about minimum lot size, it kind of depends on the size of the house, right? So theoretically, you could build a house that's 3 feet wide, then you could have 4 in. So you're probably not going to get here's the exact, because you don't know the exact dimensions of a home, right? The same way you could say, how big of a house if I could put on, again, it depends on the size of the actual home. So you're dealing in some theoreticals, but certainly I think what staff had said, and we should be able to provide that information, is based on what I think the regular size row house or a townhouse is in most instances. But again, you could build a 3 foot wide duplex. No one will be able to get in and out. You'd be moving sideways, but theoretically you could do it, right? So it's about figuring out. So there may be not here's the exact number. It depends on the size of the house, but based on the traditional of the building, this is what you would expect. I don't see any reason why we can't answer most of those questions. It would probably be helpful to, if any member of the public has a deed, again, leave this with staff in terms of providing legal advice to individual residents. There may be some issues with providing legal advice. You just have to be careful when you're providing legal advice who you're providing it to. But they may be helpful to share some of those deeds. At least I've done hundreds of property transactions. I can't ever remember seeing that language in a deed. It may be that I didn't pay any attention to it. And the other one that may be helpful, Councillor, if you did hear from members of staff who had concerns with respect to their participation, I certainly would hope that you'd be able to share those with the CAO in confidence, and the reasons behind that. We obviously want all members of the public to participate and engage. There are probably, again, some circumstances where we wouldn't have firefighters providing public comments on a fire matter, but there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to share those names in confidence to make sure that people throughout the organization don't feel like there's any retribution here. I don't think anyone, certainly in this council, has any interest in that. I think we all want to make sure we get feedback from folks. Before we jump, actually we'll start with Councillor Snow and then Cameron and then McDougall.
And I don't even know why I'm commenting because I'm not a lawyer, but I would think if there's anything on a deed like that, that's the zoning or the type of house at the time of sale would be no different. So if it is a single family dwelling when you bought the house, that might end up on the deed, but I don't think it restricts anything in the future, no different than it does if my house is a single family dwelling and I want to turn it into a duplex. I'd have to either go rezone, but now that it says it right, then you'd be able to proceed. But again, I'm not a lawyer, but that seems pretty straightforward.
I certainly think that these are very valid points and very valid questions. I had a bit of an issue with this because it came up a few times during the whole process of, if my house burns down and someone comes in and then builds. If my house burns down, I'm rebuilding that house. I don't know whose house burns down and they sell the land that the burnt house is on. Like you will have insurance to rebuild your own home. I don't think that that's a super valid concern that your house burns to the ground and someone comes in and builds a 4-unit apartment there. Am I completely wrong on that?
That's a bad example. So say let's use the house that, and I don't know, that was something that was asked of me, but here's an example of an actual that could have happened, could happen, I have no idea. So a house that we're all familiar with because I talked in here for a whole year on it was, a house that had drug activity, was finally went for mortgage sale. Its new owners come in, they completely gut it. That house is completely gutted. So if that new owner comes in, that house is completely gutted, just a shell. It's a perfect house to turn into a multi-unit. So now that house didn't burn down, but it was completely gutted. Can that house be turned into a multi-unit. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
that's an example of one.
Not with a single entrance, right? Because it's in an R1 zone, so it would need to have multiple entrances, right? You have to have a townhouse or a row house at R1 and R2 based on the bylaw that council passed. Apartment would not be permitted. So you wouldn't have, that would be the distinction, right? Would be the single entry point. So you would not be able to have a 4-unit apartment. You guys talked about that at length. So yes, you could not put 4 separate units. You could theoretically, I guess, have a single family home and have accessory dwelling units, but again, all these are questions that we should be able to share and
Yeah.
submit to staff.
Uh,
Councillor
that-
Cameron?
That
Yeah.
specific example of a house burning down came up a lot during this whole process, and it never really made sense to me, because the way I saw it was, if my house burns to the ground, my insurance is going to help rebuild my house. My other thing is, if we are thinking of sending out flyers, there is not a large population that get actual tangible bills anymore. Most people are getting them electronically. Can we look into some sort of PDF that goes out with the bill? And then, you know, I mean, I know a lot of people don't technically look fully at their bill, but then at least we've done our due diligence to say, the flyer was there. If you click on it or not, that's completely up to you, because I do think more people get it electronically than via mail. So if we are looking at that, then maybe something very quick and easy, just meeting this day, whatever.
And with the people that we outsource the work to, that do deliver them, we could put something paper.
Yep, yeah.
Just as long as, if you get your bill by paper, you get paper. Like, do you know what I mean? And if you get your bill online, we'll let you see it. A little banner online that you can click on, so.
Yes, we do have the ability to do that with our portal.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I know we went through the democratic process, and we're back here. So I thank Councillor Adams for taking this forward, and the list of items. I'd like to add a couple to it, and they're not new to anybody. I know there's a lot of dissatisfied people out there, and I talk to them daily. One of the things that I've said all along is the design and the approval of the designs. We're supposed to have that. We still don't have anything on the designs of 4 units. And hopefully that nothing will be approved until this work is done. If there's an application comes in for a 4-unit, my understanding is we're going to have some design standards, and I think the council was going to approve those design standards. Am I hearing wrong, or was I told wrong? Am I looking at Gordon over there?
Through that process, there was lots of talk about design standards.
Yes.
Near the end of the process, we had, well, throughout the process, council had discussion with staff had discussion with CMHC. The CMHC was pretty clear around what areas we could have design standards in, and they were around setbacks and more technical aspects, not necessarily you know, specifically what buildings look like. That being said, across the country, groups are working on some kind of, I'll say, prefab designs that we could include in our zoning, in our rules that would say, you know, if you want to do design A, B, C, or D, or E, those are pre-approved, and you're good to go. So, yeah, as we move forward with implementation, there will be design standard work done, and that will come back to council.
Yeah, so can we ask that nothing be approved until those design standards are approved? I know that when We6 was in here, the question was asked, and they had a number of designs, but they weren't really the designs we were going to be looking at. But so I guess what I'm asking is, if there's supposed to be design standards and we don't have them yet, why would we approve anything to be? I guess what I'm asking us to hold off until those standards are approved by council. And the other one that I have is where appropriate, and who decides what appropriate is, or where appropriate is, and who's going to decide that appropriate to who. I think we need some fluff around that to find out what it really means, because there's real concerns around that. So.
I guess just a statement. I cannot imagine and hope we never get to a point where somebody is gonna tell me the color of my house, the design of my front of my house, or anything like that, because if we get to that point, that's a sad day. So what I like on my house, or what somebody else wants to build on their property, if it's within guidelines, I think we need to be very careful on what we're wanting to do. It's good to talk about, and when we're thinking about, we have residents with some issues in regards to something that has passed, and I understand that. But when we really start digging into, let's be really stringent on design standards, and then you come forward with an idea, I think those same residents are going to be upset that they can't build what they want to build. So that's a slippery slope. I know there's some discussion and talk in the half funding. I think we need to let that process play out and see what the restrictions are, but I'll speak as one councillor. I do not want to be in a place where I'm deciding what my neighbors or other people within my ward are building because I don't like the shape of their house or the design of their house, because that's frankly none of my business.
I don't think that's what I'm saying. I think there's some design standards that are supposed to be coming forward through the WE6 that talked about. We haven't approved those yet. And that's where I was on.
I guess I don't understand what you mean by that. So if somebody can explain what that means, what you mean by there's some design standards coming forward that we need to approve, because when I think of a design standard, I think a design of a building, and who am I to decide to design somebody else's building? I think there's.
If it was that simple, why would we even bring it up through the presentation?
I don't know that. I wasn't stuck.
Okay, that's probably a good question.
Maybe what we can do as well is get some, there are a number of milestones, and there are a lot of actions and activities that we have met a number of them, but there are certainly a whole lot that we haven't, and there's a whole lot of work underway. If you council remembers, there was a chart that showed what the timelines were for a whole variety of milestones and then sub-action items. Maybe what we can do is get an update for council, probably in whether it's 4 to 6 weeks, or and some regularized reporting on making sure that that those action items are followed through. As well, a lot of those action items again go towards the direction that this council gave to staff to implement the recommendations of the Housing Task Force, so they overlap. So it would be great to have an update. Are we good? Councillor McColeman? Okay.
Are we good to go? Okay, thank you, Your Worship. So the debrief by council on the Housing Accelerator Fund official plan meeting on October 21st. I really felt personally, as one council member, based on the information that I had feedback from many residents around the city, the debrief discussion by council is a very important completion step in any process. It is beneficial to be able to hear and give valuable feedback. A strong team recognizes the important aspect of debrief dialogue as a healthy council. And the one thing I think that we need to remember, that is, in order for council to be a truly effective democratic elected body, there needs to be open communication together to hear and receive valuable feedback post-vote date, and to discern valuable insights that we all learn from the process moving forward. We've already gone through the process, but I think this is very valuable. Under the alignment with priorities, I had ticked it off under building trust, community goodwill, and collaborations, because I think if we don't have that, anything we do, big or small, we need to learn the importance of those. I think there was things that people, you know, they have invested in our community, and they saw that as an investment when they bought or built their homes. And I think, yes, they were certainly hesitant about the forthcoming changes in the proposal, but I also think in order to build community goodwill, we need to be able to talk about it. I think, you know, for some people, the thing that I heard most of all was that the city came across too little, too late by the time we heard how they were feeling or their comments. Another thing that I just want to point out tonight is I'm just trying to give a bit of a debrief on the comments that I've heard from people. I don't mean to offend anyone. I'm trying to be honest with what I've heard and say it verbatim for what people have said. So people feel that council has too many in-camera meetings. They felt that when we were going through the process of the different presentations. Sometimes they had questions. We couldn't answer them. We had to go back and get a check or a recheck on questions. And I did hear that from people. Another community comment was that for community comments, that in future, some of the suggestions that they made were that have residents' public input in person as a group much earlier and several times so that they are able to speak and ask questions and get the answers from the floor so that everyone can hear them at the same time. They felt that that was valuable for processing the material and the information, and we wouldn't have maybe run into so many brick walls at the other end of it if they could have been able to ask questions and get them answered on the floor. The information must be made more accessible and readily available than having them on screens or hard to see for people that have maybe visibility issues or hearing problems, and they don't get the bigger picture of the plans when we're just showing them on a screen. Residents were offended and felt they were lectured to, some taking offense to being called NIMBYs. And when trying to state their opinions on official plan proposed changes, they felt like they were very shut down, that they couldn't say how they felt. Another thing that was pointed out to me, and I was going to do it tonight, but because we all sat down, I didn't. Councillors need to speak up and stand up in chambers or when we have a public meeting at Credit Union Place, simply because what people said is attending, they can't hear us and they can't see us. And if we're going to put information forth, they need to be able to. And if you see the people sitting there tonight, they can't even really see us. They can hear voices. So I thought it was a very important point that people made, and we need to take that into consideration. It was also pointed out that it was very difficult due to the lack of visibility with the podium, the desks, and the computers, that the presenters were very hard to hear, especially when they had their backs to people in the gallery. So that was something, you know, that they wanted, you know, pointed out. Final point, residents spoke on, they were annoyed that Councillor McDougall, it was directed about you when you were when you were trying to ask a question for one of the people, I think, in the gallery, and they were really hanging on that answer, and they felt that you didn't get the answer when you asked the question, and that really annoyed them. And they felt, you know, it came across like they weren't getting the answers that they needed. So I said, I will bring it up. So in closing, those were some of the things. And bottom line is the overall comment from people were that they felt that they were collectively dismissed at times because of their point of view. And so I am just saying that as the message bearer. I know we all have different opinions where we're at, but that's why I wanted to bring it up to council. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to speak on a couple of those points that you made. It's upsetting to know that residents felt lectured to and dismissed. I don't like that they felt that way. I hope that it was never anything that I did to make them feel that way, because that's not the point of me sitting here. I, in fact, asked numerous times at public meetings for people to reach out to me so that I could hear what they wanted to say. And to be perfectly frank, that never happened. So I'm sure that there's very specific reasons why people felt dismissed, but I just want to say, like, if anyone out there is listening, I hope that it was never me that made you feel dismissed or lectured to or shut down. That is never my prerogative. I'm very open. I want to hear people. I want to know your opinions because, like I've said before, that your opinion carries a portion of how I vote. I do think that overall we did a fairly good job at moving this forward, but I do agree that there's instances that we can learn from. We now know that we can put on a bunch of public meetings for residents, but they don't always have access to the information. And some of that is you do need to do your own research and you do need to find that yourself. And some of that maybe we just need to go that little extra mile and give out flyers and send them in an email. So I do see with you bringing this forward where there are some room for improvement as well.
Great, thank you, Council. Thank you, councillors. We are now 7:15, so we'll move into CAO updates. I think we have 2 CAO updates, and then we'll move into our in-camera. Chief Ron, I was going to come over and talk to you, but I didn't want to feel rude and get out of my seat. Or would you be okay if we flipped the item 8B and 8A at Fire Hall? Is that okay? I know we have a number of residents here speaking to it, but I don't want to. But if you've got something you got to go to, you got a big, I don't know, hockey game, curling game tonight. I don't want you sitting there and you getting texts from your team saying, "Where are you, Ronnie? We need you." Okay. Yeah. With that, we'll just jump to the CAO updates here, item 7A.
Yeah, as council's aware, we've been dealing with a few unsightly properties throughout the community, 2 particular that I'll update tonight, one on Poplar Avenue and one on Chestnut Avenue. Previous meetings, we had updated council, we had posted notices on each of those dwelling units indicating that they needed to be repaired and or if they weren't going to be repaired up to standard, they needed to be demolished. On the Poplar Avenue property specifically, there have been some ongoing discussions with the bank who held the mortgage, or I guess still holds the mortgage on that property, and we've been working through some ownership issues on that, which have caused things to be somewhat delayed. We did get notice from the bank late last evening that they were basically walking away from the property and weren't going to assert any ownership claim to that property. So council should expect at the monthly meeting a resolution for you to debate and discuss and on whether or not council wants to move forward and the city demolish that property. We'll have some more information for you at that time. There's still, because the property owner is likely a mortgagee or in default on the mortgage, we will have to get some further legal opinion and advice that we can share with council around the risk in the city being able to recover that money if you move forward with, and the city pay for the demo up front. But you should expect a resolution, and the same with the property in question on Chestnut Avenue. So just wanted to update on those 2.
Yeah, just speak quickly on it. Thank you, Gordon, and appreciate hearing that it is going to come to council for a final vote at the monthly council meeting. I would encourage the city, when we post a notice like that and the wording on that notice, regardless, I don't want to say regardless of the legal opinion that we come back and the risk of the money that we may have to spend and then not get back if we do demolish it or cannot get back through the lien. I think it's important when we post those notices that we follow through on the wording on that notice. So I think it was very clear to the owner. We put a little bit of delay on when the bank had said they were going to sell the property off, but have since decided they weren't going to. So I would definitely, if it was, these properties both happen to be in my ward. I hear constantly from the neighbors, who I fully support 100%. I couldn't imagine living beside either one of them. I'd be in here knocking on councilors' doors as well if I had to. So in the meantime, leading up to the next vote, I encourage anyone that wants to come and sit on a couch across the street. I'm sure the lovely lady lives across the street, will let us sit on her couch with her, because I've had to sit on the couch with her, and it's not a great sight to look across and see. So I would encourage each of you to take a drive on both those streets, and then when we come to vote at the monthly council meeting, think about how you would feel if you had to live beside it. So.
Thanks, Councillor. So we'll just take a brief recess, maybe just 3 or 4 minutes, and we'll move into the in-camera session. And we'll start with the presentation from Silver Fox, and then I think we'll do the fire hall and then go back and have discussions, because I want to make sure that folks who are here presenting and Chief Ron are able to get home, because I'm sure they're excited to watch the election, because